Hi, my friends. How are you guys doing?
Hey
Good.
João, hey Norah.
Hey, Daniel. Hey, João.
I'm very happy to be here with you guys tonight. Before we start, I want to advise everybody that's watching us. My internet connection here is a little weak tonight, so that's the reason my video is not open. But we're gonna do the study the same way as always. We have loads of interesting things to talk about tonight. We are in a very special part of the book. And before we start properly talking about the book, our great friend Norah will bring us some prayer so we can get more focused, more relaxed, and then start without any further ado. Okay?
All right, here we go. Dear Mother, Father God, we give thanks to you for this day, for your mercy, for your love, for creating us, for your amazing grace. As we are studying tonight, we kindly ask for enlightenment, for answers, and for just inspiration. For those of us that are troubled tonight, that we can put those in your hands and come out blessed. If we have waters by our sides, that the mentors start putting the remedies for us as needed. With that, we will say the Hail Mary prayer. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. And so be it.
Beautiful. Thank you, dear, so much. Guys, so last week we were with Nora ending this part of the text, talking about Sal and Gamaliel, that beautiful conversation between them. And that's where we are tonight. The conversation continued at length, touching one touching on the prospects, conditions, and advantages of the business. So we saw last week Gamaliel advising Saul Tarsus that he should go to the desert for some meditation, seeking those new friends, Aquila and Prisca, that Gamaliel had already heard of them. And this is where we are in the book. 3 days later, Sal bade a highly emotional farewell to Gamaliel. He had the feeling that that final embrace would be their last. And until the camels of the caravan set out toward the vast plain, the younger man enveloped the venerable older one in loving expressions of a sorrowful adieu. The next day, Hezekiah's servants, flanking a long line of submissive camels, left Saul with a voluminous load of leather in the company of Aquila and his wife at the large oasis flourishing in the middle of the desert. So, a very different place from which Saul of Tarsus, the Almighty, was accustomed. The two workers of the small workshop welcomed him with a great display of fraternity and affinity. Saul saw in one glance that they possessed the noblest of spiritual qualities. The youthfulness of the kind couple was manifested in beautiful expressions of work and cheerfulness. Prisca worked hard to imprint her loving care on everything. Her old Hebraic songs resounded in the great silence like notes of supreme and harmonious beauty. When she finished her housework, she sat next to her husband, working at the loom until late in the evening. Her husband, in turn, seemed to be one of the privileged temperament of those who work without having to be forced. Fully integrated into his responsibilities, Aquila worked without rest under the shade of the welcoming and friendly trees. Saul understood the blessing he had received. So we're seeing a very different spirit here. He got the impression of having found in those two fraternal souls who would never be separated spiritually from the magnitude of his mission, two inhabitants of a different world, which until then he had not known. More than just husband and wife, Aquila and Prisca seemed like true siblings. This is beautiful. On their first day of work together, Sal noticed their mutual respect, the perfect harmony of their ideas, the high ideal of duty characterizing their mannerisms, and above all, the healthy joy radiating from their smallest gestures. Their pure and generous habits enchanted Sal's soul. Disillusioned by human hypocrisy, the meals were simple. Each utensil had its own use and proper place, and the conversation, when touching on topics other than their common circle of joy, never sank to gossip or frivolousness. After work on that same afternoon, the couple got comfortable at the foot of a leafy palm tree while looking at Sal with questioning eyes filled with undisguised unseasonedness. Silently, they unrolled some old parchments and began to read attentively. This is beautiful. Sal noticed their apprehensive attitude and approached them. So he was already having some thoughts about what they were reading. In fact, he said caringly, afternoons in the desert are an invitation to meditation. The infinite blanket of sand seems like a still ocean. The soft breeze represents the message from cities far away. It feels to me like we are in a temple of imperturbable peace away from the world. Aquila wondered at such evocative images and experienced greater sympathy for the anonymous young man, isolated perhaps from his loved ones and contemplating the endless pain with immense sadness. That's true, he answered politely. I have always believed that nature preserved the desert as an altar of divine silence to that so that God's children have on earth a place for perfect repose. So let's take advantage of our state of solitude to think of the holy and righteous Father and consider his magnitude and greatness. At that time, Prisca learned over the first part of the parchment roll absorbed in reading. Glancing at it from where he was, Saul saw the name of Jesus. He drew closer, and unable to hide his great interest, he asked, Aquila, I have so much love for the Nazarene prophet that I would ask whether your reading on the greatness of the Heavenly Father is from the teachings of the gospel. The young couple felt profoundly surprised at this unexpected question. Yes, explained Aquila hesitantly. But if you have come from the city, you know about the persecutions against all those associated with the way of Christ Jesus. Saul could not disguise his joy at seeing that his companions, lovers of reading, were in a position to exchange uplifting ideas about his new learning. Encouraged by Aquila's confession, Saul sat down on the rough stones and, taking the parchments with interest, he asked, are these Levi's notes? For those who do not know this, Levi is Matthew. Yes, answered Aquila, more at ease and certain of having found a brother of the same ideal. I copied them in the in the church at Jerusalem before I left. Saul immediately took out his copy of the gospel, which was for his soul one of the most precious gifts of life. They happily compared the texts and teachings. Overcome with sincere fraternal interest, the former rabbi asked solicitously, when did you leave Jerusalem? I rejoice whenever I meet brethren who know our holy city firsthand. When I left Damascus, I didn't think Jesus had such pleasant surprises in store. We left months ago, explained Aquila, now full of trust because of Saul's voluntary remarks. We were forced to leave because of the persecutions. This is very important, guys. That indirect and sharp reference to his past pierced Saul to the core of his being. Have you ever met Saul of Tarsus? Asked Aquila with great innocence in his eyes. By the way, he continued, while Saul tried to find an answer, the infamous enemy of Jesus has the same name as yours. So we're seeing here one of the reasons why Saul will choose afterwards to change his name. The former rabbi thought it would be better to follow Gamaliel's advice to the letter. It would be better to hide, to experience the justified reproach of his condemnable past, and to humble himself before other people's judgment, as implacable as it might be, until the brethren of the way could fully testify to the authenticity of his witness. I know of him, Saul said vaguely. Well, then, Aquila continued, beginning the tale of his woes. It's quite possible that during your stays in Damascus and Palmyra, you had only partial knowledge of the suffering the infamous doctor of the law imposed on us. It was often quite arbitrary. I believe that perhaps Saul himself didn't even know about the atrocities committed by the unscrupulous man under his command, because the persecutions were of such a nature that, as a brother of the way, I cannot believe that an educated rabbi could assume personal responsibility for so many wrongful actions. While the former doctor of the law searched in vain for a fitting reply, Prisca entered the conversation, stating simply, of course, the rabbi from Tarsus could not have known about all the crimes committed in his name. On on the eve of our secret departure at night, Simon Peter himself affirmed that no one should hate him, because, despite the role he had played in Stephen's death, it would be impossible for him to single handedly instigate so many hateful and wicked measures. Now, as he was listening to the humble couple, Saul understood the extent of the heinous campaign he had unleashed, giving his subordinates and sectarians the opportunity to commit so many abuses. But he asked, surprised, did you suffer that much? Were you yourselves condemned to any punishment? Now he's going to discover what his new friend suffered because of him. Not a few suffered the same abuse as I, murmured Aquila, given the condemnable behavior of a number of fanatics chosen as worthy helpers for the movement. How so? Asked Sal with great interest. I'll give you an example. Imagine that a countryman named Jacquet had asked my father many times about the possibility of buying his bakery in Jerusalem. I looked after my shop, and my old father took care of his own business. We were happy and had peace of mind. And despite the attempts of this ambitious man, my father never thought of giving up his source of income. Jockey, however, obtained a position of prominence at the very beginning of the persecutions. In such cases, evil characters always win the day. It was enough for him to be given a little authority, and the greedy man quickly expanded his criminal ambitions. It is true that Priska and I were among the first to attend the Waste Church, not only because of an affinity of sentiment, but also because we owe to Simon Peter, this is very important, guys, we owe to Simon Peter the healing of an old illness I had since childhood. This is very pretty. My father, however, and this is very pretty because on those first days of the church of Christianity, loads of people were attracted to the church because they were ill and they were seeking help in their health. My father, he continued, however, although he was receptive toward the Savior, continued to allege that he was too old to change his religious beliefs. His religious beliefs. He held fast to the law of Moses and could not understand an overall renewal of the principles of the faith. This, however, did not nullify the ambitious man's evil instincts. One day, Jacquet knocked at our door, accompanied by an armed escort, and in order to arrest all three of us. It was useless to resist. The Tarsian doctor had issued a decree by which any resistance meant death. We went to prison. In vain, my father swore faithfulness to the law. After the interrogation, Priska and I were ordered to go home, but my father was imprisoned without pity. His modest possessions were immediately confiscated. After extensive measures on our part, we succeeded in bringing him back to us, and the brave old man, whose only support in his old age and widowhood was my filial devotion, died in our arms the day after his awaited release. When he came back to us, he looked like a ghost. Charitable guards brought him almost dead. I could see his broken bones, the open wounds, and his skin bruised by the lashes. In steady words, he described the deplorable prison experience. Surrounded by his henchmen, Jacques himself was the author of the final punishment. My father was unable to endure it and gave his soul to God. Aquila was deeply moved. Furtive tears accompany his sorrowful tale. At this point, I will pass to you, Daniel.
Thanks, João. So that's a horrible story. And that actually made me think of Jonadab at the beginning of the book. Saul was listening, completely distraught by the lack of justice in that story. But he knew how things worked at the judgments, how harsh the sentences were, and how deaf the doctors of the law were to any appeal. And Aquila then revealed his understanding of the gospel by saying that he prayed that God would help Saul to be enlightened and stop persecuting the apostles of the way so they could sow in a field with no thorns. He called Prisca to remember how many times they prayed at the church and the lessons that Peter on the lessons of Peter on Saul being a brother who needed forgiveness and knowledge. We see here a true, deep, sincere exercise of everything they could understand about the gospel is to forgive the enemy. Peter mentioned his denial in order to point out our human ignorance and weakness, hoping he could prevent resentment inside those wounded hearts, and that even the persecution could serve as alert of their own sins and responsibilities before Jesus. Saul's eyes were in tears at that moment, and Prisca told she met many women with imprisoned husbands and children who used to pray to God to enlighten the persecuted of the way. And this point is interesting. You can see now how many people were praying to Saul, even though he was a cruel persecutor, the leader of all those uh, judgment, unjust judgments, and nevertheless, uh, he received so many prayers and positive thinkings about him. And this is interesting for us to comment later. The days were passing by quickly, and Saul were then suntanned and bearded, long bearded. He had now calloused hands, and the solitude plus the hard work gave him such a precious time to fill his soul with peace. In those days, he could understand Peter's devotion, Stephen's serenity, and Abigail's fervor. Prisca and Aquila got sick, but they endured bad times with confidence, and after a year, a caravan from Palmyra informed Saul about Gamaliel's death. Saul spent a whole day meditating about Gamaliel's lessons and advice. He recognized the importance of all he learned um, through his friend, and then he contemplated the couple uh, and asked them how would they what they would do if they face the persecutor from Tarsus. And both Aquila and Prisca said that They were take him as a brother, just like Jesus would do, and that uh, was such a strong moment, right? So Saul spoke beautifully about being indirectly guilty of all the criminal actions of his subordinates, about his spiritual renewal, how he have erred much and started to need much. This is so clever. This is so beautifully articulated. And then he revealed that he was that Saul, that persecutor from Tarsus. And Aquila and Prisca were staring at him in complete astonishment. And this is when I pass the word to Norah.
Oh my gosh, this is like when we go on a cut for a commercial, right? And it's the good part. He just said, "I'm so," and then the Aquila and Prisca are like, cut. But after that, it's actually very beautiful. So the next part, it's gonna take about 5 minutes or so to summarize, just because there's some really good parts in this ending that we see Sao as his coming and telling his truth, who he is. There are other parts of him that really are beautiful for us to kind of just take note of. So, Sao says, "Do not doubt my words. I assume full responsibility for my pitiful deeds, but forgive me, taking into consideration my criminal ignorance," right? So, of course, Aquila and Prisca, they were still kind of like in shock, right? So, they were in that. But Sao had like a moment. He started to weep, he started to cry, he kind of broke down a little bit. He was holding on to this, right? And what was beautiful is that Aquila embraced him. So they had such a touching and warm moment. And one of the things that Sao says, as a prominent, or I guess was thinking, as a prominent doctor of the law, he had many admirers, but he never felt fraternal affinity toward any of them. In that corner of the desert, however, the picture was different. In front of him was an honest and honorable man, a dedicated companion and a worker, a former victim of his cruel and unyielding persecutions. How many, like Aquila and his wife, were scattered across the world, eating bitter bread of exile because of him, right? And then, I'm gonna say this is the narrator to use. This is Emmanuel kind of coming in and telling us the vision of Jesus had been a living, immortal event. But in order to comprehend the full extent of his new duties, he would have to walk the narrow path of bitter and harsh trials. So we can see here that there's something happening. He's starting to see that this path is not going to be easy. And then there's something really powerful. I even highlighted it in yellow. You can see because it's really profound. We have to read this whole thing, friends. It says here, he had seen the Christ, but to get to him, he had to go back and cross over the abyss. The disappointment in the synagogue of Damascus, the comfort of the humble brethren under Ananias' leadership, the lack of financial means, Gamaliel's austere counsels, the anonymity, the loneliness, the abandonment by those dearest to him, the heavy loom under the blazing sun, the lack of any physical comfort whatsoever, the daily meditation on the illusions of life, all these had represented priceless help for his victorious decision. The gospel had worked as a light on the difficult journey of discovering himself in order to appraise the most pressing difficulties. So even though it's so difficult what he's experiencing, right? To paraphrase, he's really seeing how the gospel is coming in and really enlightening him, right? So he then continues remembering when he had that vision with Damascus, when he saw the Messiah and he got blind. You remember that from earlier parts of the book. And he says, perhaps he still harbored deep inside himself the pride of knowing how to teach, the love for the teacher's cathedra in Israel, the despotic tendency of forcing his fellow men to think like him. Whereas now, I'm going to slow down right now, he could examine his blameworthy past and feel the joy of reconciliation, turning to his victims with humility. At that moment, he felt as if Aquila represented the community of all those harmed by his cruel excesses. Gentle peace filled his heart. He felt more distance from pride, vanity, bitter ideas, and terrible remorse. Each teardrop was a little bile being expunged from his soul, renewing his feelings of tranquility and relief. This was so, so powerful. And here we continue reading. Just to paraphrase, Aquila and Prisca are still supporting him. They're still letting him vent, and they give him beautiful words because they're actually very. We can see the Christ in them. In other words, brother Saul. Look at that powerful word, calling him brother Saul after just finding out that because of him and his decree, they lost everything, especially the family member, and yet they had that Christ love and consciousness in themselves to call him brother. Let us not talk about the past, but of the power of Jesus, who transforms us with his love. And Presca 2 was, if Jerusalem were to find about this victory, they would render thanks to God, right? So they continued in this scene of emotions. And, Emmanuel is a great narrator because he hints a lot of things for us to use our imagination, our creativity in this. But, we can imagine being out in the desert and just the heat with maybe some sand and the wind passing by and their emotional, they're crying. And I don't know, it was such an emotional scene, but yet there is so much nutrition and so much of this fluid magnetic energy that's happening as this transformation is happening. So now, Aquila says, the master has brought us together. Let's leave the desert and let's proclaim Jesus's blessings throughout the world, right? And he continues saying, Prisca and I, we don't have anything. We just want to go and just spread this. What a great way to continue talking about the Nazareth, right? And then it says here that he asked, well, when do you intend to go? And then Aquila says, at the first chance, when the master shows me the way, we will leave Palmyra then. And so it says here, after a pause, during which Saul remained thoughtful, Aquila continued, why don't you come to Rome with us? Ah, if I could, Saul said, but I believe that I need to stay here in the desert, right? There's something here for me, and of course, he's remembering the counsel for him to be at the desert. So it says here that Aquila and his wife would remain there for some time in Hezekiah's service until they could fulfill their beautiful dream of working in the powerful Rome of the Caesars. But Saul of Tarsus, after thanking all of them, bid farewell and once again headed toward Damascus, radically changed by 3 years of meditation in the desert. So there's definitely a powerful moment here. You can give me 1 minute. Okay. There's definitely a powerful moment and that we see. So it's so beautiful because I honestly, the first time I read this, I thought Saul was going to go with them, but he didn't. There's also a biblical reference to this, just so that we can find the how it's with the Bible. And it's one of the notes, the footnotes towards the end. And it says here that in Acts 9:19 to 28, it gives us a little bit of information where Paul states in his letter to the Galatians that he did not go immediately to Jerusalem, but instead went into Arabia. He did not it wasn't until 3 later that he went to Jerusalem to meet Peter and James. And this is the account that covers that 3 year period For some of us that like the we're like Bible savvy in there. So that's a beautiful collaboration between the book and the Bible. So I know I have some comments to make. So I don't know who starts. Do I go? We go.
Can I make a comment to so we can start talking?
Yes, because I do want to say something regarding my section, but let's go.
Oh, no. So say that first, because I will do some. I will say something more general and more regarding the first part of our
Okay.
reading.
Are you sure? Okay, we'll go. It'll be quick, friends. I really
Oh,
think
sure, sure.
going from Daniel to what you said, and also this last part, I think we're really getting into a beautiful part to understand what Saul was teaching us in his transformation in the Spirit's book, right? In the law of justice, love, and charity. All right. So we're going to see how he's kind of changing a little bit. And in that change, this part helps us. Now, it's not the only way. It's very important to clarify that as we're making these comments, we're just sharing some insights that we all had. Of course, that's the more the merrier. So that's the beauty of studying together. So, in the law of justice, love, and charity, questions 873 says, is the sentiment of justice to be found in nature itself, or is it a result of the acquired ideas? And why is we saying this? Because in this last part, we have Saul saying, I assume full responsibility. Forgive me, taking into consideration my criminal ignorance. So where is the justice? What is happening here? The Spirit says, it is so natural that you revolt at the thought of an injustice. Moral progress undoubtedly develops this sentiment, but it does not create it. God has placed it in the human heart. So now Saul is using more of that heart. I know our brother Dan is always talking about love, and it's true. He's now using that heart to have a little bit more conscious of this law. 874 says, if justice is a law of nature, how may it be explained that people understand it so differently? And right, and we see here how even the reactions between Aquila and Prisca are so different than Saul. And the Spirit says it's because the passions are usually mingled with the sentiment of justice, thereby altering it. And Saul was very passionate. He did all these things thinking he was doing this for the law, and so much that it kind of blurred a little bit of that, right? But in 875 says, so then what is justice? Spirit says, justice consists in respecting the rights of others, which is super powerful. So, how does society come into all of this? Do we need any special obligations, right? And the Spirit says, yes. The first is to respecting the rights of others. Those who respect of others will always be just. And then I'm almost there. 878 says, so since humans have to be mistaken as to the extent of the rights, what guidelines can enable them, right? To know the limits set on their rights. And it says here, which is pretty much, in other words, the golden rule, the limit of the right that each one recognizes for his or her neighbor in relation to him or herself under the same circumstance and vice versa. So it's kind of like what is sort of happening to him. His heart is changing, and this law is beginning to like come into contact. And we've all been there, I mean, in this lifetime. Oh Lord, right? But it's so beautiful to understand how these laws come into his soul and how we can apply them in our daily lives. Now, the moral is very important too. We're going to continue. It says, question 906, is it reprehensible for those who do good to be conscious of their deeds? Because that's what's happening here. This whole end of this chapter that Emmanuel shares with us, parts that we don't get to see in the Bible, but that we get to see here, that's what it's doing. Saul is having an opportunity to see the good and the bad. And the Spirit says, since they can be aware of the evil they do, they must be equally aware of the evil and the good, as long provided that they do not grow in vain for that would be to fall in another wrong. So because Sao is having this epiphany, he's changing. And what is the thing? And in 919, almost done with this, it says here, what is the most effective means for improving ourselves in the life and for resisting the draw of evil? It's to know thyself, right? So when he's learning this, when he's getting to know himself, he's changing. And I know I talked about it, but I wanted to bring one last thing, and that's it. But I need to do something. Give me 1 minute right here. For some reason, it's not. Okay. So, is there a question that I asked myself? So, we're reading this, and it helps so much to read these divine laws that are reading in our consciousness to understand Him. But what happens like when we die? Is that it? Is there like this? Does it end? Is there even a point for all of this? That's when we come to know Solar. And Andre was a beautiful example. He had a moment like this after he's in No Solar, and I'm going to read a part where he kind of had a similar thing. It says here, until now, I had always conceived of human wrongs according to the precepts of criminology, and every incident outside the criminal code was related to natural phenomena. This is page 35. Now, page 36. Now, when he was disincarnated, I was facing another system of judging such wrongs. I did not have to face counts of torture, nor did um, infernal abysses wait. Instead, smiling benefactors were commenting on my weakness as if they were dealing with a child, with his parents, right, not knowing this knowledge. This spontaneous intervention wounded my pride. In other words, he was waiting for the devil, for something terrible, but instead, Clarencio's exuberant goodness and the doctor's unbending tenderness helped him to it penetrated his spirit. It says here, I was torn by the desire to react. I was struck with shame. I wept. I covered my face with my hands like a repentant and unhappy boy, and I began to sob with what seemed and irremediable grief, right? He had spoken an enormous truth. So this moment is so important because it does not stop. One, there's hope, just to end my part. If we find ourselves in the space we're doing wrong, we had, some of for some of like a lot of us, this is our first reincarnation that we're coming to this awareness. But maybe it doesn't happen. So when we disincarnate through Andre's information, that same processing continues because that law, right? It's written in us. So it was so profound, but I felt like understanding a little bit of this, it helped us to understand so. And I will be completely quiet, dear friends. Thank you for your patience as I got that out of my system. I'm done.
No, please talk more. Yes,
I'm
I'm
like,
very I'm very grateful that you did these comments first because they were really complimentary of what I was intending to say. Because I was the first thing that I wanted to comment is this feeling guilt that we saw that Saul Tarsus had to go through. We saw Aquila and Prisca talking about all that amount of suffer that they and Aquila's father had to go through. And I want to bring another book that was dictated by André Luiz. If I'm not mistaken, the translation of the book's name would be Between Heaven and Earth. In Portuguese, and the name is Entre a Terra e o Céu. It's a very interesting book because this book brings us a very important lesson about guilt, feeling guilty. There is a man, and this man, in one previous incarnation of his, he killed a man. And the book brings us a narrative that makes us believe, as readers, that all those things that that man was going through was and a spirit who was seeking vengeance. And as we enter the reading and we see that narrative, that story, we think, oh, so that's what's happening. He killed a man, and now his man is after him everywhere. But André Luiz goes further and he explains to us that at the end of the day, it's not a spirit, an obsessive spirit. It's actually that own man conscience. So his conscience was not letting him have a normal life, because he had created in this sick process that he had immersed himself, an obsessive spirit that did not exist in his mind. That's a powerful lesson, because we're seeing here, and Norah brought us this process that Sal went through when it comes to acknowledging the God's law in his mind and then feeling it in his heart, and the difference that we see in this man when we catch him going through all those feelings. This is very powerful. Norah brought us question 919, right, dear? Yes, and this question is very special, because she read the first part of the question, but this question bring us a very important lesson, because Saint Augustine brings us a lesson where he tells us that each night when he was incarnated, he went through, when he was about to go to bed, he went through all the things he had done during his day, and he recapitulating his day, he was thinking, what did I do wrong and what could I do differently? And this is a practical advice for us, because he tells us that that's the process he went through in order to become a better spirit. I have a couple of things I would like to read as well, because as we see this conversation between these characters here, we see that the first Christians, they went through a lot, and they were always full of hope. And then we could think why, being conscious, people would choose that pathway. And in the Spirit's book, in question 266, Kardec asks the higher spirits, wouldn't it be natural for a spirit to choose the least painful trials possible? And they answer, for you, yes. For the spirit, no. Once it has freed itself from matter, illusion disappears and it thinks differently. Human beings subjected to the influence of carnal ideas on earth only see the painful side of their trials. That is why it seems logical that they would choose those which, from their own point of view, may coexist with material pleasures. However, in the spirit life, they compare such crude and fleeting pleasures with the unchangeable happiness of which they get a glimpse. Then, of what importance are a few temporary hardships? A spirit may therefore choose the hardest trial and consequently the most painful existence, hoping to arrive at a better state more quickly, just as a patient often chooses the harshest medicine in order to be healed more quickly. Explorers who aspire to having their name linked to the discovery of an unknown country do not choose a course covered with flowers. They know the dangers they will have to face, but they also know the glory awaiting them if they succeed. This is beautiful, because we are, as Norah brought us, we are seeing Saul Tarsus in this huge change in his mind and his heart, and now he is starting to understand why those Christians, and they are full of hope. And we saw in the previous chapters of the book, he thinking, why this Stephen has this moral attitude in such, when he's facing such atrocities, why does he keep acting like that? And now he's receiving the answers. Another very important thing for us to think about here in this chapter, and I don't want to take that much time, but this is very important. We saw Aquila telling Saul that he was healed um, from a disease. They did not tell, Emmanuel did not tell us in this part of the book which disease he was talking about. But mediumship in those days, and especially when we're talking about the book of Acts in the Bible, mediumship is something very powerful and very present in those verses, on those chapters of the Bible. And a thing here for us to think um, in a very serious way is how important is to keep mediumship free, because we are immersed here in Brazil and in the United States of America, where Norah is, in a whole different perspective. But we are all facing mediums that are charging very high prices for their gifts. And the gospel according to Spiritism, and before I go to the book, and it is important to say that a mediumship, in any case, has a very, very important purpose in on Earth, in this planet where we are incarnated, because it has a very strong bond to taking people to believe to another perspective, especially those who were in this immersed in this mental attitude where they actually, from the bottom of their hearts, they couldn't believe, they didn't have anything that could make them believe something supernatural and change their lives. So keeping mediumship free is something really important. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have this: mediums today have equally received a faculty gratis from God. This is of being interpreters of the spirits for the instructions of humankind, to show them the pathway of goodness, conducting them along by means of faith, not to sell words which do not belong to the mediums, seeing that they are not fruits of their conceptions, nor of their research, nor of their personal work. God wants the light to reach everyone. He does not want the poorest to be deprived of it so they can say they have no faith because they could not pay for it, nor that they did not have the consolation of receiving encouragement and testimony of affection from those they weep for because they were too poor. This is why mediumship is not a privilege, and it's to be found in all places. To make someone pay for it is to turn it away from its providential objective. Those who understand the conditions in which good spirits communicate the feeling of repugnance they have towards everything which shows selfishness, interest, and know how little it takes to drive them away, could never accept that superior spirits are at the disposal of the first who comes along and evokes them at so much per session. Simple good sense rejects such an idea. Would it not also be profanity to evoke for money those we respect or those who are dear to us? Beyond doubt, communications can be obtained in this manner, but who can guarantee their sincerity? Spirits of a frivolous, deceitful, mocking nature, and all the bank of inferior spirits who are not at all scrupulous, always come running ready to reply to whatever is asked, with no regard for the truth. Those then who desire serious communications should before all else ask with seriousness, and following this should inform themselves of the nature of the sympathies the medium may have with the beings from the spirit world. Therefore, the first conditions necessary to attract the benevolence of the good spirits are humility, devotion, abnegation, and total disinterest, both moral and material. This is very important because we're going to enter a part of the book where we're going to see loads of mediumship, mediums and mediumship acts, and it's very important that anyone who hear us here in Brazil or there in US knows that any medium who is serious and who is a serious medium and who is working for Christ, this medium will never charge for his gifts. This is very, very important because we know that, and we totally understand that when we, as human beings, we are facing, especially when we're facing disease, those very harsh disease, and when we face a doctor telling us that there are no healing process that we could seek, that that we have reached the end of the way, we could run to anybody who tells us they can give us some help. But we have to be very, very smart when it comes to which door are we going to knock. To end my first comments, I would like also to say, when it comes to these first very harsh trials that the Christians had to go through, that Spiritism, although we have come to a point where we can see that Spiritism was the consoler promised by Christ, this cannot be done without first destroying all abuse, just as happened with Jesus. Spiritism is faced with pride, selfishness, ambition, greed, and blind fanaticism, which, when taken to their last defenses, tried to block the pathway, causing hindrance and persecutions. Therefore, it too has to do battle, but the time of battles and bloody outrages is passing, so that those to be suffered from now on will be of a moral nature, and even these are nearing the end. The first lasted for centuries, but these will last but a few years, because instead of breaking forth in only one place at a time, the light now shines from all points of the globe and will quickly open the eyes of those who are still blind. These words of Jesus should be understood as referring to the wrath which his doctrine will provoke, the momentary conflicts which it will create, and to the fights it will have to endure before it is established, just as has happened to the Hebrews before they entered into the promised land. It should not be understood as inferring a predetermined design on his part to sow disorder and conflict. Evil comes from man, never from Jesus. He was like the doctor who comes to cure, but whose medicine provokes a beneficial crisis in those who are sick. This is very important, because we are seeing this in the book, and now we're seeing this on earth with the Spiritist doctrine. That this is a very important reason why we should always be reading these amazing books psychographed by Chico. Do you guys? So sorry, it took longer than I expected. Do you guys want to say something?
After Daniel.
Hey, thanks, Nora. So I'm gonna be short in my comments. Um, so we can see, if you read Acts, especially the chapters 18 and 19, you can see that those were nearly primitive times. The laws were really unjust, and cruel executions happened every day. So um, when you read the book about the very same time, we can sense all this poetry and the beautiful words chosen to let's say, to draw the pictures. So I think the intention of the what Emmanuel intended to do was to show a cruel world, a cruel, harsh reality through the eyes and the beauty of evolved evolved spirits. You know, because we have mentioned before in earlier studies how special and those spirits are, and including this new couple in the story, which are Aquila and Priscilla also is ready, also read. So this couple is also amazing, composed by amazing spirits, and all this beauty and poetry in the words of the author I think that's the purpose, is to show harsh and primitive things happening through the eyes of evolved spirits. And everything is so amazingly articulated. And I'm talking about the plan from above. They incarnated in those times with a plan. They were intended to really accomplish these great acts they did, and it um, was a part of a bigger plan. And like I pointed out in my part, many people, including Aquila and Prisca, they prayed a lot to Saul, asking to God in favor of Saul to understand that they were brothers, and the spiritual consequences of his acts, and the harshness of the law. So it all has to do with the fluids, the quality of the fluids we are every day promoting to our planet and to our brothers, whether they are incarnated or not. So this is so this is so clever and works out just perfect with the direction of Jesus. And I think you know the question of the fluids, it explains so much. Reincarnation and fluids explains so much about us, about our lives, and about how and why things happen. And you see, I question when we studied the part when Saul got blind in the near Damascus, and I question how what how what buttons could be pushed so his eyes could stop working. Was that physically or spiritually? In his uh, perispirit body. And so there is fluid, and since we are incarnated, and us as Saul was Saul at that time, it was needed according to the laws we can study at the book of the mediums and the book of spirits. It has to be, I don't know if it's appropriate to say in English, but animalized, you know, kind of a vital fluid we have when we are incarnated. So that fluid is necessary to act over matter, and including our body. And that's probably the useful purpose for so many inspirations to prayers in favor of a terrible enemy, which, uh, which were the persecutor from Tarsus. You know, I'm having some difficulties to explain myself, but in general terms, it's that question of the fluids and the plans on reincarnation really amazes me. This is um, great about this doctrine. Explains so much about us, about our destiny, and about our very purpose on life. You know, that's it. Thanks.
Dear, can I just bring some comment before you go? Because bro, it was totally understandable what you just said. It's very interesting because I was with the Gospel According to Spiritism open here in this part. Apart from ordinary medication elaborated by science, magnetism allows us to know the power of fluidic action, and Spiritism reveals another powerful force in the mediumship of healing and the influence of prayer. um, we have already um, we have already talked, and we didn't study this book, but we have already talked about it when we were studying the books brought dictated by Andrea Luis. And in the book Memoirs of a Suicide, we have a very nice lesson, loads of lessons about the need that a couple of spirits, incarnated or discarnated, have of this fluid that comes from incarnated spirits, because it's very different. There are fluids that come from spirits themselves, only from spirits, and there are fluids that come from incarnated spirits, us human beings here. And the the worse the condition of the spirit, incarnated or discarnated, the more he or she will need fluids that come from incarnated spirits. And that's a very powerful lesson, and it totally connects to the reason why a couple of times we do feel we have to pray for our enemies. You can go, dear.
Well, just to kind of wrap up everything, you talked about humility, um, and this is kind of what Saul was gonna. He's going through this right in the Gospel according to Spiritism too, chapter 7, in the part "Blessed are the poor in spirit." We don't have time to go through everything, but it's in reference to the parable of Jesus saying, when you go to like a party, don't sit in a higher place, right? Because then someone can come and pardon you from that seat and say, I'm sorry, you need to go to this other place, right? Instead, when you go to this, when you're invited, sit in the lowest seat, so that when the one who has invited you comes, he will say to you, my friend, move up higher, right? And then the spirits say, therefore, do not seek the highest place while on earth, or set yourselves above others, if you do not want to be obligated to go to a lower place. On the contrary, seek the humblest and most modest position, because God will know to give you a higher place in heaven as you deserve it. So, that I think is kind of like what Saw was teaching us, Now he's really sitting at the special place where he's gonna begin. So I don't know if we're at the end, but I would like to end with a prayer. I'm not sure if anybody has a
I'm
comment.
100% satisfied, so we can end with a prayer. Bro, do
And
you want to say something?
I'm gonna read the prayers.
No, thanks.
Okay, so we can finish with a prayer.
We are gonna finish with this because it is important. This is another book that I have, is just prayers, and this is in Psalm 63. I'm gonna read a few part, but this is actually David actually in the desert, and it says here, "Oh God, you are my God for whom I have been searching. For you my heart yearns, and my soul thirsts like the earth when it's parched and unable to give forth life without water. For this reason I have turned my gaze toward you in the sanctuary, in order to behold your power and your glory. For your kindness is a greater gift than life. My lips shall exalt your glory." So what a beautiful message in the Psalms when we are going through a desert. We don't It's not necessarily bad. It's a moment for us to hydrate ourselves in this beautiful love of the Lord, of Jesus, of the light. Beautiful.
So beautiful.
Yes.
Very, very inspiring. So, guys, I'm totally happy. I'm 100%, as I've said, satisfied with all the things we brought tonight. I will ask one more time. Do you guys want to say something before we finish here?
Just thank you so much. And I know we had a somebody here, a sister earlier,
Uh,
to say
oh,
thank you
nice.
so much. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, dear, so much. Yes. Bro, do you want to say something?
No, thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure. Great meeting. We are learning so much together.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Look forward for the next time.
Yes, I also want to thank my two great friends here, everybody that's accompanying the study with us. Thank you guys so much. We'll be here next week, strong and ready to talk about more chapters and parts of this amazing book. Thank you guys so, so much. Okay, see you guys next week. Bye
Bye,
bye.
Bye,
guys.
guys.
Bye.